Hi, this is Dagmar Sands, and I am here today with Michael Sands, who is a property manager, and he's going to share some experience of what property management is like, what he has learned through the years that he has worked in property management. So welcome, Michael.
Hi, thank you for having me today.
So Michael, tell us, what company do you work for?
I work for Heritage Property Management Services, and we're located out on the Northridge exit, which is exit 6 on 400.
In Atlanta, Georgia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And how long have you been doing property management now?
So I've been in the property management field for about a total of, say, about 5 years, 2 of which were in rental property management, 3 of which were in HOAs.
Okay. And so you started out in a company that was doing just rentals, right? And those were single-family homes.
Right.
Is that correct?
And I worked as their specialist in accounting, working with leasing and collections. So the majority of my time was dealing with basically homeowner accounts and basically with working with different departments as far as when homeowners had any maintenance issues or other items, I would assist with that. If they needed to pay their dues, I was assisting them with that as well.
All right. And then you were transitioned into Heritage Properties.
Right, and I took over there. I started with them in their client service department, worked my way up to becoming a on-site manager for their largest property, which was a property known as Bridge Mill out in Canton, Georgia. And from there, I was promoted up again to the corporate office where I became the transition manager. I took on the role of basically assisting properties that were new coming into the company, as well as taking over properties for managers when, per se, they resigned and went on to another company or were let go from the firm. I would immediately take over those properties.
So, Michael, if someone wants to become a property manager, what type of a designation or what classes did you take? I know you have a designation. What's the name of that designation?
So I am a community association manager. So you would take the CAM course, which is a level below the sales representative course. And basically, as far as licenses, if I were to have a real estate license, I could still be a property manager. I would just be signified with that certification.
Okay. So when you were a property manager, say at Bridge Mill, what were your day-to-day operations? How did you deal? You had a board, I believe, and then you dealt with the residents. And how many total homes did y'all have in that community?
So we had exactly 2,815 homes, 2 that were not yet finished. We basically, on a daily basis, worked with homeowners coming in. Sited services are a lot different than portfolio manager work, because when you're a portfolio manager like what I'm doing now, you have usually about 9 properties you assist with you don't really see on a day-to-day basis, versus the sited properties are a different animal in that your board and your homeowners are always there. You're never kind of, in a back office. You're literally in the face of your actual client. What we do on a daily basis is deal with taking in dues, assisting with when homeowners want to change their homes with an architectural change, working with them in committees. So you're always the middleman between the board and the committees that are assigned to that community.
And then as far as the residents themselves, you helped with violations, you helped with talking with them on a daily basis, any needs that come up? And
it depends on the community. Violations are a big thing with there. Some boards are different on how they handle them for the association. Usually for bigger associations, they're more heavy-handed because you have a lot more territory to cover. So it'll depend on also how many times you're expected to do your inspection. Sited properties will do a lot more than a portfolio manager would because they have more access to the community.
So working with an HOA, and I know, I'm in real estate, HOAs are great because they keep up the value of the community because you have certain covenants and restrictions, and you help abide by those and make sure that the value of the community is, stays up, right? And I know you now are a manager for multiple communities, and are these covenants different? And how different are they in each different community?
So the covenants are a lot different. It also depends on if it's a condominium association versus a regular, HOA. You're basically looking.
What's the difference between the two?
So a lot of times with condominium associations, you have a lot more association responsibility to the maintenance, and so you're looking at 3 sections of their covenants: the association's responsibility, the homeowner's responsibility, and the unit maintenance. The unit maintenance kind of coincides with the association's responsibility. It just gets very more specific. You basically having to work many days with these properties on roof leaks for condominium associations, just depending on how much the age of the building is. You're working with claims and things like that because there will be depreciation of of certain items within the home when they're putting in a claim. So you're constantly observing those documents. You're also made aware, and you make your clients aware, that you are not to interpret them. So there are a lot of times that you have to consult the attorney. Some things can appear black and white in governing documents, and there are other times when you need to address something with an attorney, because if it's not specific, you can't just assume that in the absence of something that the association doesn't take care of it.
And what inspires you, and who inspires you?
I will say, actually recently, I took on another inspiration. So you, of course, as my mom, have inspired me as far as being a broker for your own company. And I saw that you kind of climbed up the ladder. And as far as within my own company now, my vice president that's taken over, she's created new roles with the property, and it's been an inspiration for what I've wanted to do with the company and different companies themselves, is restructure. I'm always about making different changes, kind of going with tradition of what, procedures are put in place, but always looking for an easier way, because you want to work smart, not work hard.
How much does the technology play a role in the property management? How much do you use social media? How much do you use databases? What type of databases do you use? How do you keep organized and have everything so that nothing falls through?
So in my role especially, a lot of the items that I have are on Excel charts, so that it makes it much easier this day and age to have that accessibility, because you can find something much easier. You can put things in and put formulas into something, and it'll do the logarithm all itself. So there's a lot that's basically taken in assisting the manager's role these days as far as technology. There are a lot of things that we have to look at, delinquency reports. We have to be very, very much invested in the governing documents. When we go to annual meetings, we have to know what the quorum amount is. If something were to change, we have to make sure that we know exactly with a question that comes up that we have, the answers before us. So it's always on a day-to-day basis that we're checking those governing documents. And as far as the social media aspect of it, we do have, within the property management field, have the Community Associations Institute, which is CAI. We use that platform between the managers to discuss different items and, I guess, fortes that certain managers have that help with certain properties, and kind of assist the manager with different situations that may come up, that a manager may need assistance with maintenance in a certain area, or they have certain questions regarding a legal case that they worked with. While we don't ever just take a manager's word for something as far as a legal item, we do research the articles that they have and kind of see that they can win a certain route to basically assist their community if they have, something that's troubling them, whether it be they want to put an amendment in for initiation fee, what the processes are when you have a huge community, you can't get 2/3 of a vote. The only platform that we don't recommend as far as social media, if we, have a community that utilizes Facebook, we do recommend that it's a external system where the association can, reach out to homeowners with e-blast, but it's not something that can be posted on, because social media always has this negative aspect to HOAs, where you have Facebook and items like Nextdoor that, while they are great for neighborhoods, they're not great for an HOA, because the one thing that's happening there is people are always watching, and you want to keep your property values up. So we always recommend, when you have a platform like that, and I'm more so speaking sort of to Facebook here than Nextdoor, you want to make sure that it's an informative platform rather than one where people go back and forth and you can see negative commentary.
Now, I know personally, because I've used Nextdoor, but people that may be listening to this conversation may not know what that is. Would you give a little bit of explanation? What does Nextdoor, which is an app or which is a program, how does that work?
So Nextdoor, the way it works is basically you have a system where if somebody were doing a yard sale, or if they were, they had a business and they wanted to advertise out within their community, it's a great platform to share things among. And that's what it should be utilized for, is to basically,
resident to resident.
Yeah, resident to resident. The reason that HOAs don't really recommend it as far as the day-to-day operations is because it's not a venting platform, whereas the same way for Facebook, it's a great area to make a great community and do fun events, and also help out other small business owners. But as far as the day-to-day operations, it's something that will depreciate your property values. So you got to be very careful with how you utilize it.
Now, one thing I was really impressed with, and I would love for you to share that, is when I came to your community, to Bridge Mill, and I noticed that there were a lot of color-coded charts. And it's something I think you brought into the community and you created. Can you tell me a little bit about How did you do that? Why did you do that? And how did it work and make things, like you said, simpler and easier?
Right. So I'm what you call a cross-reference organizational manager. So in my systems, I use two different organizational strategies together to make sure that I can keep an organized platform. So for instance, with violations, I color coordinated the community. I made it into different zones, assigned basically a color to it for the zone itself. All the streets I then took on the chart and made them that color. I went in alphabetical order then after that, so that you could have the exact community in alphabetical order. When you need to reference something, you knew exactly where you're going because you're going by the alphabet. And chronologically, when somebody would want to check on a violation, if they were coming in either as a new manager to take over my place, or if it's a committee member that wanted to take a look through my books to see what's going on in a certain area. While they couldn't look at the violation specifically, they were able to look at the community and know exactly where, if we had Willows Lane, they could look down at my chart and know exactly where that street was because it would specify the zone by the color and by the alphabet, basically.
So that made it very simple and very easy to look up things.
And same way with their architectural control. A lot of properties like to organize theirs by month as when they were submitted. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. The only item that's difficult there, if a homeowner remembers what month they're in, that they submitted it, it's easy for you to look up. But when you're coming in like we were with the new management company taking over a property, we didn't have any clue with the other one's system when those items were submitted. So what I would do is take every single file that they had, put them in by street name, and then I would take all of the ARCs that I had and then put them in by the number on the street. So,
and what does the ARC stand for?
So it's Architectural Review Committee, and it's basically the committee that keeps up with the design standards for the community. Once you have design standards in place, it's best to keep to them, because once you branch out from that, you begin to create exceptions that have to be honored throughout the community. It can't be something that is specific to one homeowner. If somebody gets a pool in a community that has, like we did, voluntary amenities that already has a separate area where you can, go to a community pool, there's nothing that says that another homeowner can't build a pool then. So you have to be very careful in that aspect. I speak to my community that I had specifically because you don't want to compete with your amenities, but at the same time, once one person was allowed to have a pool in that community, there was nothing I could do to stop another homeowner from having one.
Okay. Now, tell me a little bit about a newsletter, email, and communication between the property manager and the residents. Do you communicate with them on a monthly basis through a newsletter?
We
postcard?
did, and normally we recommend, it is not actually an assignment for the manager themselves. They do put an excerpt in them, but we do usually recommend to each board when we come on with a property that they do put a newsletter together and have a committee specifically assigned to that. It's great because it's informative for your month and quarter on what you're doing with your property. For instance, when we have a property that takes over, when we have violations that come in for the winter months, we want to make sure that we instruct our residents that we'll no longer be doing painting violations because the temperatures are no longer at a degree that they can go out and paint their home. So you have different updates for different seasons. And then as far as other items that we put in there, if we have any community events or if we have a calendar of, let's say, of the clubhouse being rented out, it's a good way to kind of keep them updated.
Who do you use as a coach, or do you have a coach that when you first got into the business, was there somebody like a mentor? I know you mentioned that you have a great division manager right now that's above you, but do you have somebody that shares ideas, or do y'all have networking events that you go to, like a meetup where you share with other property managers? I know you right now are managing up to, 16 communities?
Mm-hmm. Right, so with property management right now, one of the people that I definitely look up to as a coach, there's actually two individuals. One which you said was my division manager, Melissa Parker. She's dealt with a lot of multifamily home communities, and she's very well versed in a lot of practices. When we go out and do landscaping bids and different items, she's very well synchronized in what the vendor needs, which is always interesting. You have different types of things that property managers have that are their forte. Some of them, when you're doing a bid, they going in not necessarily knowing what the vendor's going to need, so they're going to kind of go in blind, which is fine, and they learn along the way, which is great because a property manager is a middleman to the board, so they're going to get all the information they can before they submit it to a board. But as far as Melissa, she took the time to really get invested in the different procedures so that when she went to train other managers, she could, give them exact feedback, so extra time that was needed. So to answer and to finalize the answer in that question, the other person that I do look up to is actually an attorney that we work with a lot. Her name is Jamie Lyons. She works with Lithega and Johansson. And the reason I look up to her is just because there are a lot of times different attorneys who work with different communities. She actually is also the person that trains a lot of our CAMs. She's assigned to train that class. There's also ones that are done by Weissman and Nowak, but Jamie is really well versed in the industry. I mean, with being an attorney, she's also very well knowledgeable of what a property manager needs to know. So I basically look up to her just in the fact that she's really good at making a law practice seem very...
She simplifies it
Yeah,
for
simplifies
you, right?
it in layman terms, basically.
That's fantastic. So what keeps you motivated even on a down day? I know property management can be a very stressful thing because I've done it for 3 years, but I did it in the commercial side of real estate. What keeps you motivated when you have a bad day or down days?
It can be a very brutal industry. It's, of course, you never have, oh, thank you for sending me this violation. It's very much an interesting atmosphere. But what keeps me kind of going is actually, in all honesty, the camaraderie with the company, and just when you actually do have those moments, the resident thanks you for assisting the community, because our one thing is, like I said, keeping up property values, and not many people see it that way unless you have a really effective manager and you also have a community that understands that, we're not trying to be heavy-handed with it. I try not to play where when I'm doing violations I'm going for a quota. I try to make sure that, the community knows that I'm diligently being out there, and that, when they call in, we're looking more so for correspondence. We have 3 different letters that go out. The first one's a courtesy one. And I try to remind them that it always says just to correspond with the office, and that's all that we really basically want. When it does get into an intent to fine, it does seem a little bit more threatening, and then when you, of course, get to the fine letter, you're not going to have a happy homeowner. But you always want to, I think for best practice with properties, is as long as the homeowner is corresponding and you get them to understand that there's a way to get them to comply and that we will work with them, that's the best kind of property you will have. You may not always get that because you have different factors, like a board that once they learn that they, can fine an individual, they start thinking that might be extra income. And we always assist as property managers. Our job is to make sure that boards that are volunteers understand how a corporation should be run. You should never be, for instance, taking in a budget and forecasting for the next year and itemizing income, late fees and interest, or even fines as a form of income. You always want to put that at zero, because you don't want to have the expectation that you're going to have to fine your homeowners or send out a bunch of violations. That you're going to have to send out violations, but you always want to make sure that the community knows that you're there to kind of, keep it on that functioning perfect world association. You want to make sure that your expectation is that you're going to have a great year. You don't want to have a negative connotation from a budget that has an income based on you're going to make $3,000 in fines, because it's setting that expectation that you're going to need to fine the homeowner to up to $3,000.
Okay. Well, I have to give you a little compliment. I was at a client's business one day, and this is a commercial client, and she knows my last name being Sands, and she asked me, do you have a son named Michael Sands? And I said, yes, I do. And she said, well, does he work for a property management company? I said, yes. She says, oh my gosh, that is the finest young man. And he's been helping me with setting up events that they had in their community. And so I was really pleased that you go that extra mile for your clients and that they remember you and your name stands out. So that really made me feel really good. The last question I wanted to ask you, Michael, is, what is the most challenging thing in your business on a day-to-day basis?
So the most challenging thing, there's 2 different things. One is internal and one is external. So the internal part is working with different departments. Sometimes it's when you have a handoff of a task, we all work with different systems. We have a mother system that feeds into a separate system known as Edge. And a lot of the times when we have someone taking a call, we're trying to manage the manager's time appropriately. The difficult part sometimes is making, sure that when we get a call in from, or let me just use an example from client services, that the information is communicated accordingly, because what we want to make sure to do is not have so many middlemen for somebody calling in, that it's addressed or not bouncing back and forth. So sometimes the difficult part there is to make sure that there's always a need for extra training. There's always, growth of the company, so you're going to always modify your procedures. So that's one thing that's a struggle, is just always making sure that you're up to date on the technology and that you understand each department, how the baton is kind of passed off.
Right.
And then the other item that's difficult is when you have, again, boards that are coming into property management that may have an agenda of some sort. You have to always protect your association. So the difficult part sometimes is you may be asked to do certain items, and you're going to have to learn to be with a very strong stomach to say no. I learned that with being in evictions. I have no problem with that now, but you need to make sure that you are comfortable when you have a client that's on a board, that they understand that there are certain ramifications, whether it be with insurance, legally or financially. They have a fiduciary responsibility. They have duties that they assign to, their duties of loyalty to the association, their duties of care that have to be upheld, and you cannot make a breach of those at any time.
Well, I appreciate you allowing me to interview you today and sharing the experience. Hopefully that new property managers that are looking at this profession today can listen to the tape and maybe get some tips from you about it. Is there any last comment that you have for someone that wants to get into property management? What should they do?
I would say if you want to get into property management, don't be afraid to be an all-rounder and get to know the different areas that are there. I mean, I came from being in client services and then became a manager. And I remember where I came from, and there's a lot of items that, as an admin, I'm able to utilize as a manager. So don't be afraid to really delve into the entire business, to learn and be a jack of all trades. Because another thing that goes along with that is that you could get a promotion into a different department just because you have the knowledge and the retention for a topic that can assist you in another area. And growth within these departments, you can work your way up the ladder just by the fact that you're very versatile in your position. Okay,
well, thank you again, Michael, for being with us today. For those of us that are listening to this interview, you can look up Michael at Heritage Properties. And we appreciate you being with us and listening to this conversation. And thank you, Michael, for being here.
Thank you for having me.